Hi, this is Joachim from Say It in Swedish, and you're listening to Fika with Vicky in Niagara Falls, Canada.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Fika. Joining us today is Canadian author Rhett Gervais, and he is one of those individuals who makes me glad that I am an adventurous reader. What's an adventurous reader, you ask? Well, I think adventurous reading is when we step away from reviews and best-selling lists. We ignore what we were led to believe are the books in school, put our reading wish lists, friend suggestions, and favorite authors on hold, and allow a book to slowly swirl into our laps like an autumn leaf. Because that is how I found Rhett Gervais's Chosen, which led to his Children of the Spears series, which led to all sorts of thoughts and questions, which led to the conversation you are about to hear. And it's a conversation I wouldn't want to miss. I know you are going to enjoy this opportunity to meet Rhett as much as I did. Hi, Rhett. How are you?
I'm great. How are you, Vicky?
Very good, thanks. And I'm ready to start discussing your work. To begin with, I was scrolling through Facebook, and as one does, when I saw a beautiful warrior woman, my compliments to Jake Caleb, right? He's the artist?
Yeah, he does all my covers.
They're beautiful. So I clicked, and when I saw that Chosen was only $1.33 Canadian, I clicked again, and I found myself in a world, not one I'd want to live in, but definitely one I wanted to read and learn more about. But then I realized I have to wait to learn more. But
yes.
Not for too long.
Not for too long.
Not for too long. And Chosen's part of your upcoming The Lost Witch of Rome series.
Yes. So The Last Witch is a series that's set during the reign of Emperor Commodus, right around 177 to about 200 AD. And it is during his reign. And, I've managed to sort of integrate the characters I've created into real world characters. So
right.
You will have Commodus, as emperor. You will have his sister Lucilla. You will have, real world characters that actually did exist. His all of the crazy, and you'll actually get to see all the crazy things he did, which I find fascinating. But the novella is sort of like an introduction. You get to meet the main character Vesper, who is a warrior witch. She is actually part of a tribe of people who basically serve as the defenders in the Roman Empire against magic.
The Ose?
The Ose.
How you pronounce Ose?
Yes.
Right.
The Ose.
And
yes, and they have actually had the witch women of the Ose tribe has had a vision of a very dark time coming during the reign of Commodus. And they decided to make a deal. This was my sort of integrating fantasy with historical fiction. And they made a deal with Julius Caesar because Julius Caesar was a brilliant general, fantastic. And some of his victories, people doubt how he was able to do that. So I integrated the concept that, well, he did it with the help of, witchcraft and magic and things like that. So the witch women actually destroyed his enemies for him, opening the door that he could become dictator of Rome. Unfortunately, he ended up dying because of it, getting a knife in the back, as we all know from from history. But in the end, it did create this empire, and that the witchwomen of the tribe did constantly create this position of the emperor's hand, as someone who served to defend against the magical incursions that threatened the empire.
But they weren't doing that freely, right?
No, initially yes, but at the end it was sort of like seen as an obligation, and you learn over time in the main series that the emperors have sort of taken advantage of the Ose to sort of expand the empire quicker than it would be normally, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what ends up happening is that there's this constant threat, like, well, you come to war with us, or we'll destroy your people. You can have as much magic and power as you want, but when Roman legionaries come after you, you're done. So they were coerced to sort of expand the empire beyond the basic purview of their agreement. But that's a lot. There's a lot of backstory that is not necessarily bogged down in the main story. The main story is actually a lot of fun, a lot of adventure, a lot of excitement, and a lot of political intrigue. You get to meet, these crazy characters from history that we only know small portions of, but what we do know of is just insane.
And that's one of the nice things about having this novella, this little bit of story before, because you can put a lot of the background into that.
Absolutely. And people like background. It's one of the comments I've gotten is that people like to sort of know the mythos of the world, the little bit of, structure that you build it on, right? It doesn't have to be long and convoluted. It just has to be sometimes a chapter here, a chapter there. People are curious about things like magic and fantasy worlds, and they like different concepts of how you can put those fantasy and magic together. Even if you just explain it a little bit, people enjoy that.
Well, that's the problem with, I'm not a huge fantasy or sci-fi fan, but I like when there's something we can grab hold of, something human, right? Instead of just, and having that background of how that world works without just trying to figure it out yourself as you go along is just an amazing accessory to your enjoyment.
Exactly. And it creates, if you do it right, and I know that there are authors who are very much into the fantasy, and there's a ton of magic, and there's a ton of world building. And it's fine, but I personally feel that having a little bit of mystery, where you just show a little bit behind the curtain, is enough to tease most readers, and they like that. And, the whole point of reading is to let your imagination run wild. So if you've had a small tease of what, the foundation of the world is like, then, you can sort of make up the rest as you go along. And it's a lot of fun.
Exactly. It's not saying anything about other types of books, because we all have what we like best, right? Yes, and there are those that like that world, and they may be further along in fantasy reading. I don't know. But I do like having that reality point to kick off from. And that's why this idea of taking the history fact and covering it with the mysticism and the fantasy is so attractive to me.
It's attractive to a lot of people, and I think that it's a very easy thing to do, and it's a very fun thing to do, because there are stories from history where we're not sure how they actually did this. We're not exactly 100% sure how they built the pyramids. We're not exactly sure how quickly they expanded the Roman Empire, or how they maintained something so big. And putting in a bit of mysticism in there sort of, whether it's true or not, it sort of explains things, and as we go on in the main storyline beyond this book, is there are cults, right? Different cults and, different religions, which literally, it's not common knowledge, but these religions and cults competed with Catholicism. So we end up in this situation where there are these massive religions that existed throughout history that we know almost nothing about, that were direct competition.
Because they were word of mouth. And yes. Then when they became enemies, the other people's word of mouth is somewhat negative.
The victor writes the history, So what could be a beautiful and, creative religion ends up being a cult, So it does happen quite a bit, of where you'll have these interesting concepts and interesting religious backgrounds that are completely discarded as being, evil or wicked, whereas that's not necessarily true. It's just the Catholics won.
Yeah, and that was the time when all of these different pagan-y religions were being threatened and being forced into the darkness, right?
Of course.
Right. So the mystical things, you have a lot of symbols in this book, like the tree. It's very symbolic all over the world for these different belief systems, and the weave and all of those things. It's obviously, besides the history, very well researched.
Well, a big part of what you see, what I've created, and I'm rather proud of that, is that there's an enormous amount of history, that comes out of Africa, that comes out of this continent, where humanity started. Our first civilizations were out of Africa, before the written word actually existed, and you keep seeing the same sort of symbology in different religions and different cultures. The tree, the flood myth, the very notion of magic. These came out of African traditions, which ended up being traditions for European civilization and North American civilization. But because people came out originally of Africa, we end up with very common mythos, right? Because we all started as one tribe and just sort of expanded to cover the world. So the commonality of like the tree of life is amazing to actually see.
No, and I think we should mention, because we didn't before, that this group of people, the Osei.
The Osei?
Osei, thank you. I will never get it right. The Osei. Okay. There's a quote somewhere that don't make fun of people if they say a word wrong because they learned it by reading. Okay, so I say lots of words wrong because I spend so much time in the book. They are in Africa at this time. Yes. It's just some of them that travel to Rome.
Well, here's the other thing that's actually, we forget this, but the Roman Empire was a very metropolitan place. It was not uncommon for someone who came from what is today modern England, to rub shoulders with someone who came from Africa, and this was really common.
Right.
So it was only after the empire fell that everybody sort of went back into their corners. But like how you have in modern society, where everybody sort of rubs shoulders and people come from all over the world for opportunity, Rome was that beacon of opportunity for the rest of the world. So people of all nations and cultures, they all sort of conglomerated in the empire, and you had this wonderful metropolitan civilization that has stood the test of time, and it's a good reflection of what our civilization is today.
Yeah, we sometimes get the idea that people were, because it was ancient times, that people were in their area and they didn't travel and this is just not the way it was. They were all over the place.
No, people are naturally curious. We always want to see what's over the next hill, what's across the ocean, what's across that lake. And it gets us killed sometimes, but it does also, allow us to travel and see fantastic things.
No, exactly.
Up until the turn of the last century, some of the biggest heroes were, like Alan Quatermain, the guy who explored Africa, and it was very mystical. And Marco Polo, when he wrote his first book, it was a massive bestseller. He lied throughout most of it, but people had this curiosity of where he'd been and what he'd seen. So.
Well, and people just think you're clever if you write a book, so that gives you cred right there, right?
I've been writing that clever thing for a while now.
And another thing that makes me feel really secure about this as a reader is that you already have the series all set up and ready to go. So it's not like I'm going to read one book and then wait 6 years for you to get around to read. That's always nerve-wracking.
I as a reader, because I've read I'm a constant reader. I read an enormous number of books, and nothing is more painful than finishing a book and going, okay, where's the rest of it? And not having it. So yes, I tend to write quickly and think of my reader before anything else, because it's a terrible feeling of not having that next book, of not knowing what happens. You form a bond with these characters. You like these characters.
Right.
And the last thing you want to do is just sit there for 5 or 6 years trying to figure out what happened. That's not fun.
No. And then you have to reread because you forget details.
Of course.
And it's just a big mess. So I'm with you. I'm at the point now that I check ahead to see what's available before I even start to delve in. Like, I'm not going there.
Oh no.
I'm just not. We were speaking about George R. R. Martin earlier, and I
Oh
just
my
don't think
God,
he's going to write another book because
he's not. He's
why?
not. Because you want to know why? Because he's been given way too much money. Right? He's like super rich now. He has no motivation. Everybody
the TV
loves
show
him.
did it.
Yeah, the TV show finished it. That's okay. He's never going to finish that series.
I agree. That's the opinion in this household. It's never going to come. You know, and people don't get to tell him what to do. So
and listen, let's just be honest. He created a fantastic world with fantastic stories,
exactly.
And we have to give him that. But if he doesn't finish the story, it's okay. They finished it on TV. As a reader, I'm really disappointed. But as a writer, I get it. You know, it's like he's got like way too much money now.
And look at the size of those books. Like he just might not have it anymore.
That's part of it too. If you're going to write 1,000-page book, you know, at a certain point, I think he just got bored.
Yeah.
If I'm being really honest.
Well, he's been with those characters for so long, and they've been given an ending. Like, isn't part of the reason you write to find out what's going to happen to your characters?
100%. And you know what? I had this conversation with my wife the other day, and she was looking at me like I'm crazy. Because I'm talking about, you know, the relationship Vesper has with another character. And she's like, really? Don't you just tell her what to do, or don't you just write what she does? I go, no, she has a mind of her own. And so does the other character. They decide where they go.
Shh, they're going to start locking writers up if you tell that stuff.
But it's the strangest thing. And unless you write, you don't really get it. Characters end up showing you things and going in the oddest way that you least expect sometimes. And I especially if you've taken the time to build up a character's backstory and background,
right?
And so you will end up in a situation like, well, what would this character do? You know, because you know the character intimately, right? And you know their flaws, you know their weaknesses, you know the things that drive them. And there are times where it's like, no, that makes sense. This character would do that, and it makes perfect sense to you. Sometimes it baffles the reader, but a lot of readers. I've had characters who've done crazy things, disappointing things to some readers, but I've had readers tell me, you know, I don't like what he did, but I get it. I understand why he did it because I've been reading this character now for, you know, 2 or 3 books. And
right.
Yeah.
They become real for the intense reader and the intense writer. And maybe if there are characters that don't take over, they're not as good. Like
no, they're not as fun to write for sure. You know, the very notion of that you would create a character who's not going to be entertaining or who's boring, you know, is no fun. You literally have to be at your keyboard every now and then, laughing like a crazy person in surprise at what your character has done. That's a very natural thing for a writer. It may not seem natural, it may seem crazy, but part of the fun, you know, as a reader, when you read something, you get excited or you're laughing or it entertains you. We have the same feeling. We're just writing it from that, you know, from a different direction. And it is absolutely true. Characters surprise us all the time.
Well, I think writers tend to be observant people, right? They sit back and watch the neighbors and the family. And so they're sitting back and watching their character.
Yes.
In that same way. I mean, that is not crazy.
You're not supposed to laugh after you say that, Vicky. That's not crazy, then you laugh and it's crazy.
Okay, well, in a court of law, I wouldn't. That's the defense. Now, how many characters die in this series?
Oh my God. Okay. A lot of. Oh my God! All right, mm-hmm. I will.
You've been taking lessons from George.
No, I have not. I have not. Every character has a natural ending, right? Mm-hmm. The one thing George did in his writing is he punished characters for being stupid. right?
But we all want to do that.
Yes. And it takes courage as a writer to create a character, develop them, like them, love them, and then when they do something really dumb, to kill them.
No. I'm not going to admire you for this.
It's 100% true. I have had characters that have done the dumbest things, and when they die, I'm like, I feel really bad about doing this, but you did something really dumb. You shouldn't have done that, and now you're going to pay the ultimate price for it. So, and it also gives a sense to the reader of like, oh, my favorite character could die. You know, I've never killed a character needlessly, right? But your favorite character could die. So, you know, I hate reading, right? And I know for sure that, you know, the main character is never going to die. If you've ever read Robert Salvatore, the guy who does the Icewind Dale stuff, his characters never die. You know,
and no, I don't like that either, because then I know I really care, right?
Yeah.
Like the amount that I feel sometimes at the strangest characters, because I haven't realized what their being means to me, right?
Yes.
And it's all, you know, it's all different things like this. I just felt that it might be part of your Dungeons and Dragons past. You know, it's like, please, I know at some point you've rolled a dice to see what happens to a character in the book.
I have never done that. That's not a bad idea, though. That is not a bad idea. Listen, I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons since I was 16 years old. We started in high school, and yes, I have killed a lot of characters as a dungeon master. Sometimes without mercy, sometimes feeling bad about it. But it does also give you a sense of how a character's...
Sometimes feeling bad about it.
Sometimes feeling bad about it. Some characters really deserve it. But it does give you a sense of what can drive a story. You know, sometimes characters don't grow unless there are tragic incidents in their lives. It doesn't always have to be a death. It can be a loss of self, a loss of virtue. That I think that one is a big one for me. It is the loss of virtue, the loss of, you know, am I a good person? You know, that questioning of yourself. And I've written a lot about that in my previous series.
And we will get to, I want to go into that full scale, because that's a whole different.
It's definitely a very different series. It's a bit of a more mature series. But in this series, when we're talking about The Last Witch, many Romans were very virtuous. They were very proud of their goodness. They were very almost bragging about, you know, how good people they were. And that's not necessarily true. And I think that's a reflection of modern life, too.
I don't have the most positive view of the Romans. I know they did a lot of things to promote civilization, but, you know, that conquering...
Well, the truth is that the empire was at its best when it was conquering.
Then they ran out of steam.
They did run out of steam. They stopped having the I won't say the desire, but it ended up biting them in the ass, because at the end they had created so many enemies, so many people,
and they were spread too thin.
And they had problems internally and externally, right? So their system of constant expansion, there's only so much you can expand without really upsetting your neighbors. Can
you expand at all without upsetting your neighbors?
Not really, but when you're the stronger person, it's not a problem. But at the point of where they became very corrupt and very insular, and the nobility stopped paying attention to, you know, the plebeians, the common people, that's when it got really bad. You know, because if your soldiers are not fed, if your common people are not proud of the empire that they live in, it gets to be very bad.
Yeah, and there was that whole Colosseum business. I mean, that wasn't really positive.
No. No, and we're going to see a lot of that. Actually, we're going to see we're going to see a lot of that in the main series, where you will see, because it's quite spectacular what they did. That Colosseum, when it was built, it was actually they had naval battles in there.
Yeah, no,
they would flood it, and they would have mini boats, and they'd have naval. They did awesome things, and it really does reflect a lot in modern life and our modern idea of the football game and all of the game,
I agree. Yes. Sometimes if you watch little 5-year-olds on a hockey team, you just think they just threw them in a gladiator coliseum. It just, with the booing parents and.
Yeah. But the gladiators were superstars back in their days. They were famous. They would endorse products.
And they'd have cards now.
Yes, they would have cards.
Yes. So, Rhett is going to kill some characters. Just a heads up, okay? And that's what he does. But he does, as you said. What was your quote on your page? It's if you like dark, gritty.
If you like dark, gritty characters, I'm your writer.
He is. He's your guy.
But it's there is a touch of humor in there. It's just not all death, but definitely characters get to grow up.
And these are issues. I mean, and you can delve into them. Look at. We're reading it. We're talking about it. We're still laughing because it is fiction. Okay, people.
Yeah. It is fiction. It is historical fiction.
And we need to start separating that. This is not real.
Not real. No.
Every character's views do not reflect Rhett's, I'm sure.
No, not at all.
I mean, they're so different. You would be in a lot of trouble if you were carrying along all these.
No, but you know what? That's the amazing thing is that I get to in all the stories I've written, I really get to express all the different elements of personalities, of politics. Politics I agree with or disagree with. And the fun thing about it is because if it's something you disagree with, you have to research it.
Right.
If you want to sound even remotely credible, you have to research all the different facets of the political spectrum. And you end up sometimes really learning a lot of new things and understanding. And if you have an open mind, you can learn a lot. And I have taken great care because I spend a lot of time on Facebook. I use Facebook as my main platform for promoting my work. And I have made friends with people that on a day-to-day basis, I would never really, interact with, who live in a far different part of the world than I do.
Right.
And I can communicate with them because I understand their point of view. And not everyone can do that. And so I'm very grateful for writing to be able to teach me how to interact with people, how to understand other people's point of view. And it's enlightening.
And that's the same thing that reading does, whether you're writing and researching or reading and it interests you into something and gets you to research more about it. Learning allows us and being open-minded to look into so many different things that we wouldn't normally.
Absolutely. And I think that it's one of those things that we've sort of lost the thread of in modern society, is that reading about just a varied, myriad of subjects that we can learn different points of view and different perspectives. And it's okay. It's not a problem. It doesn't mean you've committed yourself to one group or the other. It's just, you're just learning. You're just finding out the point of view of somebody else.
And with your permission, I'm going to cut that out and put that under what Fika is all about.
Okay, no problem.
I don't know if I will or not. It will depend on the mood.
It's fine.
So we discussed the fact that you were a dungeon master and you were passionate about that. And what a lot of people don't understand is, and I'm thinking maybe you played WoW. Because
oh boy. Okay, so I will. I played WoW for about 10 years. Mm-hmm. It is probably my biggest regret, and probably the thing I'm most proud of. I lost a lot of time playing World of Warcraft. I did, however, have all of my organizational skills, all of my planning skills, all of my time management skills were taught to me by playing World of Warcraft. And I would never go back and lose any of that, because you ask how I was able to, or am able to write as much as I am.
Because you had a quest and you finished it.
Exactly.
No, I am not a player of games, but I have a family and
oh boy,
a son who grew up and his father, but that had to be stopped. But no, he learned a lot through WoW. Like, as when he was driving transport across North America at like 21, he would just get in the truck and be given a quest and had a map, and the windshield was the screen, and he would end up in Boston and say
100%.
You know, it was, there's a lot of learning that people don't understand in those games.
People take the skills required to be successful at games for granted, but the skills required to be successful in World of Warcraft, it is not an easy game to play, especially in the beginning. Back in 2004 to 2007, it was a very difficult game. And if you were successful at that game, it meant that you learned, working with the community, organizing, research,
teamwork,
all of those things that actually help me today write with my, to be a father. They all come from World of Warcraft in terms of just the basic underlying structure.
First, I want to note that you did that back in the old days of Warcraft thing.
Oh, yes.
When it was hard.
When it was hard, I actually played vanilla WoW, and I raided all the old dungeons and things like that, and I had an enormous amount of fun doing it, and it took years off of my life, but I would never give that back. I learned so much.
No, it's not a waste of time, as many do. And two, there is the story element in that as well. There is in Dungeons and Dragons, in WoW, in any role-playing game, there's big part of it is story. I've been telling stories as a DM, as a dungeon master, since I was 16. And the great thing about being a DM, about having a group of players follow you, is that you're telling a story constantly, and you have to develop new content every week. It's not that you're playing, once in a blue moon. You literally have to develop a new story or expand the storyline every week to keep people entertained. And you have to keep them entertained.
Exactly.
Like, you have that immediate reaction right there, that criticism, and I'm sure they're ready to criticize. If you just killed them.
Yeah, well, the throwing of the dice and calling you an idiot, and other impolite things, is absolutely worse than any review that you can get for a book. Your critics are right there, they're red-faced, and, they're denying you pizza because they didn't like the story.
Oh, my God. He lost food privileges.
But, yes, all of those things, you don't see it. Because when I decided to start writing, I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified. I was like, what makes me think that I can actually do this? And
what did make you think that? Like, not in a bad way. What got you started?
Well, I became a father in 2012, and I really wanted to leave some sort of legacy to my kid. And I honestly couldn't play WoW anymore. I didn't have time to play games, but I still had that driving need to create something. Right? I'd spent so many years creating ideas every week, or role playing in a game like World of Warcraft. And when I realized that it was just begging to come out at a certain point, at one point I had a little notebook on my desk, and I would write these little story ideas out, and I would just, I would leave it there for a couple of weeks, and then, I remember I was driving with my wife, and I said, "Hey, this would make a great story." And she goes, "Well, why don't you write it?" And I go, "No, that's stupid." And I this happened a couple of times, and at one point, the idea for Children of the Spear came along. It was actually inspired by a song,
Right.
and I listened to that song. I'm like, "Wow, this I got to write this story."
What song?
The song is called "Against Me." I forget the name of the band. I'll look it up. But it's a story of a girl who basically starts off very young, and she ends up burning out over time, right?
Right.
And so it just shows the cycle of abuse that she did to herself. And what ended up happening is I said, no, I got to write this story. And if you've read any of the Children of the Spear stuff, that girl was Gwen.
Okay, she's in Ascension number 3.
Yeah, she's in Ascension. And I started writing Gwen's story, and it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And it was no longer a little notebook. It was actually, I created characters and an outline and a sort of world. And then at one point, I remember I was sitting at the kitchen table with my wife, and I don't know why, I was absolutely terrified. My wife is the most supportive person in the world. I would not be anywhere without her. I love her so much. And I go, "Babe, I want to write a book." And she looked at me like, "Really?" I'm like, "Yeah, I don't know what to do." She goes, "Well, just go write it. You've been telling me these stories for years, so just go write it." And so that's what I did. That's
fantastic. So
how it started.
Yeah. So, but before we go, because we're here, we were talking about how your time and your organization and how the story writing all came through. And you actually, okay, before I go there are 5 books in the Origin series, right?
Yes.
And then you wrote a novella for that, and a novella for the Last Witch of Rome series. And there's 3 books there, which I imagine are basically complete, because
they're basically complete. They're editing, and breaking them up. It's like one really big book that's got to be broken up into 3 books in the editing process. Yeah.
So you've done all of that since when?
Since July 2017 is when I fully went all out and started really committing to it. I stopped playing video games. That was a big part of it too. Because even after I stopped playing World of Warcraft, I still played a game here and there, but nothing to that level of commitment because I no longer had the time. But I still played games. But I converted my gaming time into writing time.
And so that's like 3.5 years?
Yeah.
You've done all of this in 3.5 years. So that's like 9 books and 2 novellas starting from scratch.
Yes.
That there's nothing to that's amazing. Like, aren't you impressed with yourself?
I try not to be. More often than not, when I feel stuck or I feel down, I remind myself of how much I've actually done. But a lot of it is if you commit yourself to a project or to time, finish it. My wife says very often will say, how do you do it? What tips would you have for anybody who's looking to write? Well, the easiest and most constant thing I can tell people is get a space for yourself. Find a space where you can be alone, that no one's going to bother you. Commit some time every day, right? You can. I know friends who say, "Oh, I need to be inspired to write." You don't need to be inspired to write. You need to be inspired. You need to be inspired. The story is your inspiration. Once you get an idea for a story, that's your inspiration for the story. You just have to commit to writing every day.
You have to work then. It's work.
It is work.
And it's a work of faith, because you don't know how it's going to end. You don't know if you're ever going to sell it. You don't know those things. You just write. And the great thing about the modern world now is that at the tip of your fingers, you have access to all of the knowledge of the world. Google is an amazing thing. You can learn anything you want. You do not have to leave your house. You don't have to go to a library. You don't have to go and pick through odd stacks of paper to find things out. It's all there at your fingertips. So the research has become much easier. And there are
courses and YouTube videos and all sorts of suggestion pages and things like that, where you can learn the craft. But it does require you to put your butt in the chair and your fingers on the keyboard and write.
And not get sidetracked by cute puppy videos, which I'm all for.
Well, we call it, my wife and I, we call it the YouTube hole, where you click on one video and then you down the rabbit hole like Alice. But it's
it takes discipline to do anything aside from that when you're on the computer. It's so easy.
It happens to me every now and then where I'll just watch one video because it's going to inspire me for this, or it's going to give me an idea. I look at the clock and it's 2 a.m. and I've written 100 words.
The lies we tell ourselves.
But
no, it's true. Great things with what we've been given. Like, I don't even know how I survived before, the internet, all of this knowledge. I call it the magic box because I can just go to it and ask it anything, and it will tell me.
Yes, absolutely. I write between, depending on how I feel, I write between 500 and 1,500 words a day. And that's a lot for someone who...
Well, you also work.
I do also work. I have a day job. But for a lot of people who don't write, that seems like a lot. But
no, it's not.
There are guys who will write and girls who will write, 1,500, 2,000, 3,000 words a day. And actually, Stephen King's book on writing, which if you haven't read it, absolutely
it's fantastic. It really is
fantastic. He talks about his process, and his process is very, very enlightening.
And pretty simple.
And quite simple. But a lot of it is commitment. It's commitment to, this is what I'm doing. I got to do these 2,000 words every day. And, 2,000 words a day is quite literally a book every 2 months. Mm-hmm. And so if you really want to do it, if you really want to write something and get something out into the world, because it is a very good feeling when you have something out in the world, when you have a story out there, then you can commit to doing 1,000 words a day, 500 words a day. It'll take you a couple of months, but you'll get it done.
And so the bottom line is you just have to show up, basically. And 2, really what's holding most people back is confidence, not time, not just confidence.
I think having, is going to sound kind of corny, but having a muse, whatever that muse happens to be. For me, my muse is my wife. So I can't divorce her, else I'm not going to write any more books. But whatever it is that's that thing that you write for, that inspires you, that sort of whispers in your ear, you've got to have that. And
a passion. Like, you already had a storytelling passion with the Dungeons and Dragons.
Absolutely.
And exactly. And you also can't divorce your wife because she lived with you during the WoW days, right? And and as a WoW widow.
Oh, yes. WoWwidows.com, yeah. I remember
No. I support him. Just, you got everybody. You have to do what you have to do, right?
Of course.
I mean, everybody's allowed to play.
Yes.
So, yeah. Okay, maybe we better leave the WoW subject. So, no, that's not. It's not corny. It's true. You need supportive people around you are very important in anything you do, and you should never leave them.
No. You'll find, once you find a certain level of success, you'll find a ton of supportive people. It's when you've just started, when you have no clue, when you're basically driving in the dark. That's when you need supportive people who will be that sort of guiding light and give you an idea of where you're going. Even if they don't know where you're going, they're the light that shines, that gives you sort of, glimpses of the future. So
it's like Corey Hart said, no one wants to know you now. No one wants to show you how.
Damn, that's good.
And so you must never surrender, right?
Yeah, that is one of my favorite songs. I know that. Like it's kept me going through some pretty rough times as a kid. So you're giving away your age there, though.
Oh God, my age was given away a long time ago. It's a great excuse for many things. No, I don't understand that, and I can't learn. No, I don't. I do try to learn. I shouldn't say that. So yeah, Corey Hart, great lyrics. They're obviously he lived those lyrics, right?
Obviously.
In order to write them. So that is going to bring us to the Children of the Spear series. Yes. I'm going to let you go ahead and give a little synopsis on that.
Boy, this one's dangerous. Okay,
first of all, I've spoken to Rhett. Oh, he's a very nice guy and a very optimistic and uplifting guy, as you can see.
Yeah, I am super optimistic. I'm super positive. But The Children of the Spear is very much a dystopian superhero series. And it is set in the future where...
2065?
Yeah, so it's about 40 years into the future. And it's... In my point of view, it's a natural progression of society, a society that has become more corrupt and less supportive of its population. So just as you have in many third world countries, there's no middle class anymore. It's either you're wealthy or you're poor. And so the effect that has had on the United States is that the government, in sort of desperation, has combined with the Catholic Church. So you end up with this sort of mixed
in the book.
Not in
fiction.
I know it seems like that in real life sometimes. But
in the times we live in, I just want to make that straight. In the book, Rhett is saying in the book, and this is fiction. Okay, go ahead, Rhett.
Yeah. So the United States government has sort of mixed with the church, creating this sort of mixed oligarchy where the church does have a massive influence. Once again with the population. And this population doesn't know any better because it's very poor. And one of the things that's happened is that because the United States doesn't have the military might that it used to, they've created a concept called ascension, where they can actually turn young people into superheroes, people with powers. And that's the general story. And this is the experience of these kids, of how they go through from a very young age, having powers way beyond what they could possibly imagine, and they're put in these impossible situations where they have to live and do very adult things, right? So,
the hashtags might be, it's detrimental to be the chosen. The idea of a pure save. Well, you know what? That's the point. Okay. They don't have to. They choose to do things that is detrimental to their soul in order to help others. And that's a concept that a lot of people don't want to look at.
No, it's, people always assume, if I had superpowers, I would do these awesome things. But the truth is, if you were given superpowers, most people, first off, I created this wonderful, this was about 3 years ago, I created this wonderful poll in a user group of mine, and I asked people, what would you do if you got superpowers? There were 4 superpowers, and they could choose, right? This was on my Facebook page. And I asked people, what would you do if you got, teleportation, invisibility, flight, or super strength? 90% of people would do something criminal. Right?
Are you serious?
Yeah. The first thing people would do is get rich, which means they would rob somebody, or go invisible and rob somebody, or go in the past and rob somebody.
No, Rhett, your reality is depressing me much more than your book could.
Oh my God. And so
I just can't believe that.
Yeah. but in the end, right? So I've given these kids in Children of the Spirit, I've given them superpowers, and then I've sort of unleashed them on the world. They have to, and especially initially in the story, they have to, do what the government tells them, do what the church tells them, right? Because they're weapons. But in the long run, they sort of realize, well, I'm stronger than you. I have more power than you. And so there's definitely a power imbalance, and there is a sort of like a transformation of these kids into being victims, into being the victimizers. And that happens quite a bit too.
Yeah, no, their trauma is carried on. So most of these kids are coming from, well, they didn't have schools, right? So lack of education, which is not, you can learn in the world, but there's no communications. Like, there is no internet really allowed.
So some of the main characters, like Bobby, who is one of the main characters, he his parents died at a very young age, and he essentially gets recruited by the church because he's a homeless kid. He gets recruited by the church with the promise of a bed and a meal every day to work in the church. They were in the initial story, they were restoring a church in Boston, which is a beautiful church, actually. I forget the name of it now, of course, obviously, because I'm talking to you.
Well, I know it's Father Gary is running this church, but I can't remember the name. There's a church, people. There's a church. Okay, good. Well, cathedral, right?
Yeah, there's a cathedral. In any case, they're in the main storyline. They're restoring this church, and he basically gets abused. He gets abused, beaten, accused of things that he didn't do. And in the long run, he eventually gets recruited to a program that changes him from a regular person into a superhuman. And especially the first book, that's his story. It's his growth from being a nobody into somebody. The first two books are about him, and as we go throughout the stories, we meet other characters, people that he loves. We meet people who we meet Arthur, we meet Gwen, and Arthur absolutely loves Gwen, but there's this. Will they, won't they, and it ends up really badly. But in the long run, it does end on a very positive note as these people grow and they develop, and they do eventually, I don't want to ruin the story, but they do eventually become very heroic overall. But it takes a long time to get there, and I think that's what would happen to most people. Most people, if you give them powers, if you give them the ability to be stronger than their neighbor, right, they'll take advantage of the situation at first, but I think a lot of people are inherently good, and that eventually...
Even after your poll?
Yes, even after my poll.
I believe that before you told me about your poll.
No, I do think when you're writing about superheroes, the thing you have to realize is that people are inherently good as long as they're allowed to be good.
Mm-hmm. Right? So and they came into these powers with a lot of hurt, distrust, feeling. And the youngest one was how old?
Well, the youngest one. Oh my God, I forget his name. This is not good. I'm just because I'm.
No, you have a lot of characters.
Yeah, I have a lot of characters, but the youngest one I think is like 11 or 12 when he gets converted.
It's a very confusing time, anyways, and
yes,
and
but just imagine you go from being powerless, right, as a child, to being powerful. You're still a child, and you don't have control over all of your emotions. You still are learning who you are, and you have all this power.
And yet you can't use the power because you're still in a way being controlled.
Exactly.
So you haven't actually lost that part of your life. No. Whether you're, controlled by people, controlled by circumstances, you're still controlled. So, the question remains, I'm not going to tell people what happens in the story. I'm just going to say, because it's so hard when you have these talks, I'm just going to say the kind of questions that are posed by this writing, right?
Yes.
So, the idea that in order to do good, you must do bad. Life is not black and white. It's gray.
It is. Life is very gray.
And complicated.
And when you put feelings in there, right, that are, because the way I look at it, when you're growing up, and I remember being, 13, 14, 15, I remember it very well. And not only are you physically immature, but you're emotionally immature, right?
Well, of course, you're still growing.
Yeah, if you see the emotional reaction from a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old with a situation, right, where as an adult, hopefully, you'll be able to manage it better, right, because you've had the life experience to deal with complicated situations. So the emotional maturity is part of growing up. And if you take away that opportunity for kids to grow up and you put them in very mature situations, it makes for an interesting story, and it makes for a very dark story until those kids do actually grow up.
Exactly. And come into their own, which is why so far I would say, I think one of the characters that was older when they were ascended actually deals with it somewhat
Much
the best.
Better.
Yes. In that situation. So it poses that question. It poses the idea that the church, or any institution, you're just using the church, right?
Well, the church is easy to use because I have, personal experience growing up in the church. Mm-hmm. I was an altar boy until I was in grade 6. And, it was really odd. I remember at one point, the first time we had Mass in grade 7, I could literally recite Mass, right? Because I'd served so many times, on Sundays, twice a day, that aside from the priest's sermon, I knew in and out the Catholic Mass. I could preach it. And the church just felt like a natural extension for me, and not as the bad guy, right? But as someone who does have power and resources.
Exactly, as a controlling element.
Yes. And the thing is that you see now is that the church does have this element to it where I'm sure if a government was floundering, it would take advantage of the situation. Because this is what happens in the storyline, is the government does flounder, the government does run out of money and resources, and the church steps in. And of course, when the church steps in, it also takes a piece of the pie.
Well, yeah, because, as much as we talk about Rome having its Colosseums,
yes,
the church had its moments in history as well. So it's just a natural thought.
It is a natural evolution. Mm-hmm. Very often governments, like republics, become empires, and empires become republics.
Well, yeah, it turns around all the time. As soon as you go one way, the pendulum goes the other way, right?
Exactly.
And it just swings back and forth. And sometimes it becomes a guillotine as it's going back and forth.
Well, listen, right now, and it's funny, globally, we are, going towards imperialism, very right-wing ideals sort of taken hold in the idea of the population. And it's very common that people think that, one leader can solve all of the world's problems. It's not necessarily true, but definitely the idea of, a republic becoming a dictatorship is very prevalent if you watch the news these days.
Well, because people once again, you're bringing complications into this book, right? The idea that one person cannot save everything makes complications. There's no direct thing to blame. There's no, we're going to fix that now. I was lucky enough to win tickets to a talk by Michelle Obama last fall. And she said, not taking sides, people, she wrote a book, and But it was an amazing talk. And she said, and I feel she has the experience, that when you walk into that position of power, that her husband did, that you don't even have the opportunity to get to what you really want to, because there's so much you have to work through before you can make any changes. So it is a complicated place to be.
When you look at there's two things. There's the perception of power and actual power. And the way most republics or most modern democratic governments are designed, power is very much diversified between many stratas of government, being that like a parliament like we have in Canada or a Senate like you have in the States. The courts have an enormous amount of power. And of course, yes, you have the president or the prime minister who has an enormous amount of power as well. But because of what we've seen in history of what's happened when power becomes concentrated, we've become very careful as in terms of concentrating that power. So while I don't think it's going to happen as quickly as it did in, say, Rome, I think that the potential for any country in the world, to become, a dictatorship or an empire, it's there. It's very much there. And
so what Rhett is saying in that 5-minute dialogue is, is that one of those powers could be the church. Right?
Yes, very much so. Very much so.
No, I'm just...
They actually... they are actually one of the richest organizations in the world.
No, exactly.
They have the money and the resources to really step in and support governments or prop up governments. And I'm quite surprised they haven't.
Well, they may, and you just don't know. No, I'm not going into conspiracies. I'm turning away from that.
But one thing I would like to point out, right? While I'm not a religious person myself, Faith, one of the main characters in the story, Bobby, he's accused of doing some pretty awful things, and he doesn't. And technically, he should have done those things. But his faith is the thing that guides him. His love and faith are things that stops him from being a bad person. And very often, we talk about the church or we make fun of the church. But when you have real, true faith, it can make you a better person.
Yeah, and you can have faith in many different things. But it is something that helps people. So he's not saying, look at the man has had bad reviews because of this. I read them and I'm just like, but can we just critique on his writing and plotting?
No, I got it. You know what? I take it in stride. I knew when I wrote the series, and I included elements of the Catholic Church in there that I was going to get shellacked for it. But it didn't matter. I wanted to write it.
But there is such a like the world I come from now is like not like that at all. So it just every time I run into that, it is surprising to me, even though I know it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it is fiction. He took a situation that could possibly happen. And you don't have to apologize for that. That's what writers do. It's fiction.
It's not something I would ever apologize for.
Yeah, you're just...
I'm actually really proud of the story. And there are...
As you should be.
There are people who have contacted me directly, religious people who absolutely love the story. And they've seen themselves in some of the characters. Because I do discuss faith. I do talk about the good parts of religion too. And at no point do I say that religion is bad. There are bad people. There are bad people who are, as part of the religion, and there are people who take advantage. And I think we tend to forget that every
like
organization,
anything. It's the people involved. Every church, every person, every thing is different in every situation.
Yes.
So when we make huge generalizations, the church is good or the church is bad, it just doesn't work.
Yeah. But the other thing about that series is that it has a lot of kick-ass action, a lot of cool characters, a lot of fun.
Well, I was going to say I have this written down, but I'm going to say it in my thing. I think that comes from the Dungeons and Dragons. You do an amazing job of keeping the action moving and describing the settings and the armor and the weapons in such detail, and it grows. Like, I tried to sneak ahead to the last book, people, because I wanted to know what was going to happen. Don't judge me. I did it in the last Harry Potter because I couldn't stand the suspense, and then I go back and read it. So I said, don't judge me, Rhett.
Oh my God. Of all the books too.
No, but then I went back because I just couldn't stand it anymore. Like, and I read back and I was comfortable, and I went to the end. Okay.
Well, so
back to your book.
Can I tell you a secret, Vicky? Can I tell you a secret? I do that too, but don't.
Okay. Thank you. Many people do that.
A lot of people do that. Anyone who doesn't do that,
has no heart. So, but your books, I went to skip to the last one, and it had developed so much that I was like lost. So this is definitely a series that you want to read 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in. And it's easier for you to do that because for the low cost of $9.99, you can get all 5 books, and that's like $2 for a book.
And if you are in Kindle, you can borrow the book. You can borrow the entire series. The entire series is now in Kindle Unlimited. And it is one of those things that once you get into it, it is a quick read. I don't like boring books. I don't like
No, it's not. It's not boring. It's not boring at all. Like it's clear, concise, action-oriented writing, and that's a good thing.
Yeah. Well, listen. For the most part, I like characters who are realistic. So when I draw characters, when I create a character, we talked about that a little bit before. But the characters have a life of their own. They have their own ideas and attitudes and things they'll do. But definitely, based on the backstories that I've created for a lot of them, they're their own person. They're interesting people.
Yeah, no, the characters are each very different. Even though we say they come from this background, they're very different backgrounds with very different experiences from that background and very different ways of dealing with them. Right?
For sure. Absolutely.
So, the characters, it's good writing, Rhett. It's good writing. I was not expecting you to apologize for the church. I just am saying that these are questions that you bring to the mind, and they're good questions to answer. Questions are never bad. If you can't question something, get out of town because it's not a good place to be.
Exactly.
Okay. So don't make me feel like it's good. It's good writing. It's concise. It's action. Like I said, the weaponry grows with it. It's written laterally in the first couple of books, which, non-linear. What's the word I'm looking for?
It's non-linear. So
but it's done in a systematic way, so it's not confusing.
No, in the first 3-4 books, it is very much. There's a lot of. There's always there's always 2 timelines in the story, right?
Does it go into 3? Okay, I must have to catch up to that.
They're there. In book 3 and 4, it's less pronounced. And in book 5, because of the way everyone, I don't want to spoil anything, but because of the way of how many characters I had to have in the fifth book. I sort of
didn't kill off. No, I don't know. I don't know. I haven't read the fifth one yet.
I have not killed off all the characters. Some of the characters died because they deserved to. But at the end of the day, because they were stupid. That's it. But at the end of the day, in the fifth book, it's more linear. But especially in the first book, it works incredibly well
because it's a chapter then a chapter. So you're almost getting two books.
Yeah.
You're getting the backstory book and the story now. And I found it, what I am doing here, if Rhett's not getting it, is complimenting him.
I did get that. I did get that.
His ability to do that, because I found it like having, because I do like backstory, right?
Okay.
So it's almost like getting two books for one. The backstory, like you didn't have to write another book. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then
for sure.
and then it was cause and effect. That's it. I like cause and effect. I like cause and effect in life. I like that way you can decide who's stupid. but you can see the background of why this is important today, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so that's a nifty thing about those books.
Yes, and one thing I do, I think at heart, even if I'm writing science fiction or science, I grew up watching Star Trek. I like to explain the why something works, why magic works, why technology works, and while I don't, overdo it, there's never this sense in the stories that I write that, it's just because, I didn't just pull it out of my butt.
No, which is why it makes a good science fiction. Like I said before, I need something to ground me if it's going to... I mean, all the other science fiction is good to people who are die-hard science fiction fans.
Yes, that's a very specific audience.
Yes, I am not. I live with individuals who are, but I am not. And so this is a book to me. It's not like a science fiction book. It's a book. It's a story. It's a background. It makes perfect sense.
Exactly.
And that's why it's good. So you can get, the Children of Despair collection is $9.99. Don't buy them separately. Is that okay if I say that, Rhett?
No. Yeah, absolutely, 100%. I would rather you buy them all as a box set and enjoy them. And the only thing I can say is, if you are a believer, I know there are points where it seems like I'm on my way to offending you. I'm not.
Well, people have to remember it's a book.
Yeah, it's a book,
story. And it's a story, and it's
at no
fiction.
point am I criticizing people's beliefs.
If you cannot look at things openly, then you shouldn't be reading.
No.
That's the way it is. There are some sensitive topics that you broach. More so than religion. I don't know how you manage that, because after watching Star Trek, he does boldly go where he would not.
But there's nothing vulgar in this story.
Nothing, no, and nothing is seen. It is dark. It is gritty. If you're listening to this and you're like, Vicky, what is that thing? Just message me and I'll tell you. But before you get involved, if you're ultra sensitive, but we all know I'm ultra sensitive and I'm living through it. Okay. So,
oh my God.
Shh. You don't even know me, Rhett.
I'm getting a picture.
I told you, I'm not getting paid. I'm afraid.
It's all volunteer.
And what does that mean, people? Money isn't everything. Freedom speaks for a lot. Okay?
No. Enjoy your life. That's what counts.
So, right. We talked about the books coming out this fall for
The Last Witch.
Yes.
Everything comes out. There's 3 books that will be coming out this fall. And the story goes from Vesper essentially being thrown into slavery, her becoming a gladiator, and in the long run of her becoming what we call an imperator, a
Yeah, I
general.
wasn't sure how to say that either.
Yeah, a general. The series does lead into the year of five emperors, which is a great time in Roman history where you literally had, it started off with a senator basically buying the emperorship, right, from the Praetorian Guard. He literally paid a small fortune for the guard to declare him emperor, and it didn't last very long. They ended up killing him real quick. And so in a single year, I believe there were five emperors. And so the third book does go through that. And the second book is more along the lines of her being a gladiator and fighting a gladiatrix, actually, which is the term for a female gladiator. And the first book, of course, is her backstory, introducing of the main characters.
And that comes out on September 17th.
That may be a little bit late, but it will be out before the end of September.
Don't you disappoint me. So,
No, I will
are
not.
we pushing everything off? Okay, so no, really, I talk a lot, but I probably won't get there exactly September 17th. So don't change your life for me, Rhett.
No, it's okay. I get it. But if you enjoyed the movie Gladiator, if you like Spartacus, the TV show, if you like anything to do with Rome,
yeah, you're not as dark as Spartacus.
Oh no! This the whole series of The Last Witch. I built on. Unfortunately, it sounds terrible to say, but I did not go as dark at all. There's a lot more.
I was talking about the Children of the Spear when I said that. I wasn't started. So if it's not dark, are we thinking more Xena here?
More Xena, yes. So there's a lot more levity. There's a lot less, I find the characters to be a lot more positive, and that's actually quite fun. So because of the nature of the world, the people, the kids and children of the Spear sort of reflected their environment. Right. And in this series, they also reflect their environment. And we can't forget that, at its height, Rome was basically a party town. People drank.
Well, yeah, they were.
Married, and they would go to the Colosseum for a good time and watch people fight and watch naval battles. Not all the time. Not everyone died. But they definitely had a much more positive outlook in life and this wonderful world where,
they were more innocent. Not in their behavior, but in their attitude.
Oh, yes. And their behavior was cool. I mean, I think people would recognize a lot of what we live with today, especially in that period of Rome, where, they had literally 100 years of growth and, a golden age. So,
you are such an optimist.
I am.
I'm not such a Rome fan.
But no, they literally when Commodus came to power, they had literally had a golden age of four great emperors, men unfortunately, who made the world a better place, or the Roman world a better place. Yeah,
I just think we should specify that, and then I'll be calm. Roman world, a better place.
Yep.
And yes. And so, I'm looking forward to that and finish off the rest of this series. And,
yes.
And, like I said, it's a
if you like, but definitely Rose.
What's that? Are you still there?
No, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, no.
I'm still here.
It's a well-written series. I believe. I mean, not that I'm, a university expert or anything, but as a reader, it's a well-written series. It's interesting. It's provocative. How's that for a word?
That's a good word. Listen, I do take the time, even as an independent author. There are I have two editors. I have two proofreaders. And I do have an advanced reader team. So the books do go through a pretty rigorous process. And I am committed. I've read some pretty crappy books. I've read some amazing books, and my goal is always to make something that the reader will enjoy, that will make them think, that might piss them off, but it will also be fun, and a good read, something that you might want to go pick up and read again. So that's my worldview on writing. I just don't want to put out books to put out books.
Well, okay, let's go back. No. That's the thing. Is there are so many books dropping now, right? That to find, like, I have a load of books that no one knows about on my Kindle that will stay there in secrecy forever. Because I'm not going to say anything, but somebody has to be adventurous and go out and check those books and report back to the reading public, right? And say, this is good. But we must remember that Rhett started this off to leave a legacy for his daughter, something that would live on. So he's not going to put something out there that he's not proud of.
No, absolutely not. And it's important, that if we're going to write fantasy or if we're going to write science fiction, that we tell these new stories and unique stories. I think it's really, really important to not just tell the same story over again.
Oh, no.
And, while Children of the Spirit might be a little bit different, it definitely is a unique take on superheroes. And while Vesper is not your typical, witch, she is a unique character, and it is a unique take on the story of Rome. So,
and something that I'm sure, see, I come more from the pagan community, so I'm right up there with this book. Okay, I'm not insulted at all. So, which is good. That's what I'm saying here. And warrior women and all that wonderful stuff, and just fun. And the other book, if you're into technicalities and stuff, the growth of the armor and the way they go and everything, if you're a thinker, that's a great series as well. It's fun to read and it's action oriented in the battles, but it's pretty deep. I'm sorry, Rhett. It's deep.
That's okay. You can have action adventure and still be able to think about it a little bit.
But you're too busy running. That's it. So where are the best places for people to follow? What are you working on another series yet? Well,
this series, I will have probably another book, maybe two, depending on how it splits up on the writing.
Okay.
And then I have another series I want to write, but I don't think I'm going to be allowed to write it. But
because of time or because of subject matter? I'm sorry, it's not my business.
No, because of subject matter.
Okay.
We'll see.
Can you send me? No. My problem is curiosity. I'm not going to ask.
I'll send you. It goes back towards religion, and it just. But it's anyway.
You need to behave, Rhett. Okay.
I do. Listen,
take a break. Write a non-world threatening book.
Well, you know what? My players have asked me to actually write the storyline that I have for my D&D campaign.
Okay.
So I may just do that.
Because then you're talking about different classes and a fantasy world, and so you're not stepping on any real toes.
No.
We can read into it what we want. I'll know what you're thinking. Okay.
No, I do have to behave myself. And here's the thing, when you're a writer, you have more ideas than you do have time.
Oh, exactly.
And that's the hard part. You definitely have all these stories you want to write, and it's just there's only so much time you can sort of fit in to write them all.
It's like the opposite of reading. There's still so many books and so little time.
Yeah. And I wish I used to read 2-3 books a week, and now unfortunately I can read maybe one a month. Where I'll get some time just to myself and hide away in the basement and, knock a book out. But
Well,
it's been...
But that's part of having a full-time job and a wife and a daughter and a life.
Yes. But with luck, if things are going this way, I'll be writing full-time next year. And that would just mean more books.
Fantastic.
So you'll get to see...
And can you give us, I'll put them out there as well, but can you just list off some of the best places for people to find out about these books, those books?
Sure. Obviously, Amazon.com is a big one. Everything's there. Just type in Rhett Gervais and you'll see my author page. I do have a newsletter that goes out about once a month. And that will be, if you type in my name into Google, and you'll see that I have a website there.
Right.
If you put your name in there, you'll get a free copy of Chosen. If you go in and you'll download it for free, it goes onto your Kindle, it goes onto whatever device you want via BookFunnel. So I owe you $1.33, Vicky. No. And,
you made me laugh enough to cover that.
And actually, starting next week, if you actually, obviously, if you go to my Facebook page, but if starting next week, because we're coming close to the launch for book 1 of the Last Witch series, next week, if you actually join the mailing list, you will get, I think it's the first 20,000 words. So you'll get the first, third, a little bit less than a third of the book. So say the first quarter of book 1, where you get to meet the main characters, and there's a bit of action and a bit of adventure, but it is a sort of grab you by the teeth sort of story, and it pulls you in really, really fast. So if you join the mailing list next week, you will actually get a copy of the first.
Just to make sure that you're hooked on the books.
Just to make sure.
But they're all going to be out before Christmas, so...
Yes. But if you've read Chosen and you want a little bit more, just to sort of, wet your whistle, definitely we'll have the first part of the book online and up, and that'll be free. And then, obviously, if you want to buy the full thing, you can on Amazon. But if you reach out to me via Facebook, I'm always available. I answer within the hour, unless it's like
he does
within 3 a.m. at 3 a.m. And you know what? I've had great conversations with people. You would think people are crazy, but most people that I talk to at weird hours are really nice, and readers in general. Readers in general are really nice people.
They are because they're open-minded and they read about different things and different kinds of people.
Yep.
And they're vampires.
Don't sleep. They don't sleep. Oh my God! But I'm the sad truth is I'm usually up writing until about 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. So that's how I manage to get it all in. I just I don't sleep enough.
Okay, so sleep enough that you're going to be alive to know this is not healthy. But and if you get these books for free or $1.33 or whatever, remember, as hypocritical as it is for me to say, but I do the radio show and bring them to your attention. So I'm excusing myself because I'm behind. But write a review.
Please. Even if you're not positive in your review, I don't care. Write a review. I do take because listen, if I'm to get better at what I do at my craft, I take what people say to heart. Obviously, if you call me an idiot without backing it up, I won't respond to you. But,
so if you call him an idiot, have proof?
But the truth of the matter is that criticism, positive or negative, does make us better authors and better writers.
And that's what many authors say. However, I still believe that you should be judged on your writing and your plot, and not necessarily the subject you choose to write on. Someone can say this is not my subject, but to knock down your stars for that, I don't agree with that. And I'll fight that. Okay.
All right, I have you in the corner. There you go.
No, it's just I once read a review for Topsy, the circus clown, and I mean the circus elephant that was killed, and it was a great book, and the person got a 1-star review because the elephant dying was sad, but it was history. Like,
Okay. That doesn't make a lot of sense.
so
What?
So, I shouldn't write reviews any more than I should read Facebook comments because they all make me angry. I shouldn't read reviews.
You should stay away from the Facebook comments.
I don't write them, but sometimes I have to know what those little people in the box are thinking.
But you know what? I have managed. I'm a very patient guy, and I have managed to actually convert some very angry people into readers. And those are the people who actually become the most, some of the most committed readers to your side. You know, when you've managed to convince them that your work is good. If you take the time to respond to some of those people, you can actually convert them, and they end up being some of your biggest fans. So I got no problems.
So you're magic. I just got to stand up for my writers.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
It's just what I got to do. Okay, so you know where to find them. You know what to read. You know a whole lot about them.
Too much, maybe.
And don't review this show. Okay, so
They talked way too much about religion.
Honestly, I don't know why it's okay. They're not. You're allowed to do that.
Oh, yeah?
So
for sure.
You
for sure.
are definitely allowed to do that. So as long as we're respectful. I tried. Maybe I'm not. Okay, maybe I better redo this show. So I think we covered everything, right?
Yeah, I think we did. We're good. That was fun.
Okay, so you take care, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon. Right?
All right, no problem. Thank you so much. All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rhett, for giving us a peek into your series, generously sharing your time and writing tips, and for the lively conversation. I hope we get a chance to speak again in the future. And to everyone who's listening, until our next Fika, may your coffee be hot and your stories sweet, but perhaps with a little forage into the dark side when reading them.